Guess who's back? Back again. It is not Slim Shady, it's Slim Tay here. I am here to introduce the next part of my chat with Michael Loftus. I'm glad that you guys are having a great time, as I know I was and am in part one so far. So without further ado, part two with the, comedian extraordinaire, commentator, stand-up pundit, writer, Michael Loftus. You talked before, something I had a pin in my head is the drag queens and with kids and with all this impacting kids. Now, there's an elephant in the room that I want to call it how I see it. And this is what gets into, my girl, J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter, right? Is that I do feel like conservatives have this tendency to hop on any sort of thing as a conspiracy designed to corrupt America's kids. And I feel like it's exacerbated perhaps now more than ever. I didn't know this, but there's a new podcast that I'm obsessed with. I can't say enough good things about it, where J.K. Rowling now is finally having her piece. And it's a really deep dive into her and feminism and trans and all this, right? But it talks about, I didn't know this when Harry Potter first came out, how problematic it was, not only for conservative commentators, but also in the church and religious leaders, and how they had a problem with it, witchcraft and fantasy and, demonic this and that. And, it seems like, again, that just reiterates different versions of itself today. I'm not saying there's somewhere it has to draw a line. Like, do I need a drag queen in a G-string twerking in front of my 3-year-old that I don't have? No, but like, right? It's like, okay, but is it a little bit of an over exaggeration sometimes?
It always like makes me laugh when I remember that now as you're bringing it up, because I'm like, well, I should read these Harry Potter books just to see what all the fuss is about. And to me, no, seriously, as I've written on a bunch of TV shows, sitcoms, films, and
Yes.
to finish a novel. This is just a novel. It's funny and I highly recommend it. But like that's a huge accomplishment, right? It's like the one mountain I hadn't tackled yet, and I plan on writing more. So when I think of J.K. Rowling as a single mom going to the laundromat, writing this thing and thinking out this world, and the world is so well thought out. It's such a wonderful piece of fiction. And then to have people go, oh, it's sorcery, it's witchcraft. No,
Right.
it's a great story. It's a great story. No one's actually wandering around with wands, trying to actually do this. It's fiction. And that's why when everybody and because it is such a powerful, and I got nothing but love for J.K. Rowling. Like she is
Mhm.
a modern day Walt Disney.
Yes.
Nothing goes out the door with the Harry Potter stamp on it unless she
Right.
personally has overseen
Right.
it. And you go to Universal and dude, I got the wand,
Right.
and you're doing it and lights are coming on. It's fantastic. So it just goes to every time she's attacked, it just shows what a wonderful thing she's created. Even when she does
Yeah.
silly things like, oh, Dumbledore was obviously gay, trying to help out, and you're like,
Throw him a
obviously,
bone.
I don't remember him sucking anybody's dick in those,
Did I miss that chapter? Was that fan fiction? Like,
right,
did that go down?
right,
Michael, it also, same thing with the Nikki Haley thing. It also feels wildly hypocritical because this kind of blowback is coming from the same people. This is where it all just falls in on itself and what I call like the woke eating itself. But like these are coming from the same people who are wearing the pussy hats and all day long, like women this. And it's like, I see. So you're going to go ahead and attack, a political opponent, right, for her age, or J.K. Rowling, arguably the greatest literary created one of the biggest literary empires ever,
yes.
as a woman. And it's just like uh, like you should hear these trans activists. They play audio recording, Michael, in the podcast, and they literally are like, no one gives a fuck about, to J.K. Rowling, you'll die alone. No one gives a fuck about you. You scum, da da da. And it's like, what a way to bring everyone together. Am I right? Like, it's just wild.
Well, I think that's the natural outcome of identity politics. There's always going to be I'm better at this than you, and it's just a circular firing squad. And right now, there's a bunch of targets, But as people get canceled and apologize and go, oh, they always say the same thing. I really need to educate myself more. That
God, give me a break.
as you eliminate targets, it just gets smaller and smaller
Right.
until finally it's just one, which brings us back to what the founding fathers were saying. Like individual rights, individual freedoms. It's a ridiculous waste of time. The whole woke thing is just a ridiculous waste of time.
It's so intolerant. And, while we're talking about this and founding fathers, Michael, how about, the idea of schools and universities? And there have been studies and, polls that have come out that have shown that universities are wildly more leftist than not, right? But like, do we need to change the name of this building and that building? And like, you guys are really going to go after Abraham Lincoln? Like, what? This statue and that statue? My eyes
Yes,
twitching. I'm sorry. My Penn State degree is fucking pissed. It did not sign up for this bullshit. What?
yes, and by taking down a statue of Thomas Jefferson because you're judging him by today's standards, like what's the vast improvement? Like what is the up? Did you see that freaking statue called the Embrace that they did in, I think it was Memphis, on Dr. King Day?
Oh my God. Yes. It was a personification of you and your wife with COVID that night. And that is the statue. Are they serious?
Yes, yes,
And
horrible. See, that's just what I'm saying. It's like when I was talking about the human form and classical beauty
sure.
and architecture, all of it. Like that, it looks like a person just holding a giant dick turd.
No,
And
a
it's just
dick turd. Not a dick, not a turd. A dick turd. Yes.
a
Bringing everything
dirt.
together, people. Yes. But it's so ironic too, because again, it's where everyone they have their blinders on and they can't even see their own discrepancies. It's like, this is again coming from the same people now, but it's like erase history, but ram home history with implementing something like CRT, right? It's like, what? Either we acknowledge it or we don't, which obviously it's better if we do, so history doesn't repeat itself, right? But
Yeah.
it's like they cherry pick, you know?
Yes. And then the question, and this is the question that I encourage people to ask, when I do the Loftus Party podcast and to a degree on the website is why? Like with CRT, why? Like what is the benefit of it? And it seems to be equality of outcomes. Okay, so if you go for equality of outcomes, well, then you're talking about socialism then, right? And like that never works. It never works. And it just leaves millions and millions of dead people, like with Stalin and China and everywhere else. So what is the upside in even pursuing that path? I'm all about like, hey, everybody's equal at the starting line. And if you show me a law or a policy that is legitimately racist, I will
Sure.
protest with you tomorrow and I will never rest until that law is changed. But when you start talking about, airlines, oh, we're gonna have equity in the cockpit. We need to hire more women of color. We need to hire more Native Americans with only one leg, and we need more Asian girls with diabetes and a dick on their forehead. Like,
Right.
can they fly a plane? Can
Right.
they fly the plane?
Right.
That's what
Right.
I want, the best people for the job.
I wholeheartedly agree. And it's funny, even with Nikki Haley, when you talk about before, I'm a woman of color. It's so funny because you're right. It like plays into the left thing. And it's like, we're seeing how that's going with our vice president, who literally all she can focus on is like the color of a school bus. Like, I don't give a fuck that she's a woman. I want whoever is the best for it. Now, I will say, with all of this kind of reckoning, it's like I feel like a little bit on the seesaw, because on one end of it has certainly opened my eyes to a lot of things that I didn't realize before. Even we talk about as women, right? Like pretty privilege, right? And the idea of like a white pretty girl perhaps getting into a room a black girl wouldn't get into, like things like this, like the little, even like resources and economically, like it's certainly opened to my eyes of how I may have had a leg up, right? on the other end of that, I think that if you make it everything like CRT, like this, like that, it just like destroys the human spirit. And I think that it like debilitates you, right? And that's why like I love the conservative spirit of like what you said. Like we all are, you know, we're right here at the starting line, and we all have equal opportunity, and that's the beauty of this country.
Yeah.
But I do feel like sometimes they'll go a little far in acting like it's not a thing at all. Like we're all totally this, you know what I mean? Where it's like, there's a little more nuance than that. You know, it's not so black and white, no pun intended. But
Well, here's there's a couple things. And for like the good looking girl, the benefits of that, yeah, you can get into the club when the ugly people have to stand in line. However, there's
people,
also, well, that's just always been true. It's
sure.
weird. It's like with sexual harassment. It's only sexual harassment when an ugly person does it, you
Oh,
know?
I talk about that all the time. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
But
Yeah.
like, so you can get into the club, but how many people, no offense, and I like, how many people meet you for the first time and probably and know nothing about you and think, oh, she must be stupid.
Yes, and I love surprising them. It's the best thing ever.
That's great. So
It's so
there's
fun.
always like an unintended, and
Sure.
that's what's happened. Every policy beyond hey, everybody gets to vote. It's like every policy the government puts in place has unintended consequences. Like the black community was doing much better on paper back in the 1950s, with family units, less people going to jail, less people being incarcerated, more small businesses, more entrepreneurship, more home ownership. And then when the government comes in and
Right.
says, hey, if you're a single mom, we're going to give you some money,
Sure. Right, right,
it
right.
just it destroyed
Right.
the family unit, and we're still living that out. So I would just
Yeah.
say, everybody stop. I know you want to help and I know it feels good to help, but there's unintended consequences. And instead
Sure.
of like letting the federal government make this decision, how
Yep.
about you make a decision
Yep.
as a human being to be a better person?
And even on a psychological level, like I said, I think that if you put that in your head, it holds you back. I met this woman recently and she was such a badass, and she talked about being autistic and raising her daughter. In her mind, socially, these things don't add up. So in her mind, it's purely what you said. Like everyone is at the same starting point. And I love this story because she's raising her daughter with this mindset. Now, her daughter, I want to say, is like 14. And unbeknownst to her, she was taking college level classes that was like unknown in her school. And they ended up, basically, I'm butchering the story, but it's like she kind of found out after the fact. Like she didn't think anything of it. And then when she found out, it's like, oh, right. Because if you put it in your head, oh, I can only do this, I should be at this, you're going to limit yourself. And it's the same thing as I feel as a woman, any minority, whatever. Like if you go in your head thinking you're limited, then that's what it'll be. But like this girl is over here, like, taking the LSATs and being like, oh, I thought this was normal. I didn't know.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Which is just such a wonderful thing. And that's like when in like nature versus nurture and all that
Right.
stuff comes into play. And you are kind of a product of your environment. I
Yes.
remember
Yep.
being a kid and my parents were watching 60 Minutes. So, that was just, however, they did this social experiment where they took a family out of South Central LA, a really bad neighborhood back in the day. And it was this African American family, single mom, and they took her and they put her like in Encino or something,
Uh-huh.
right? And so all the kids in Encino were like, we're going to go to college, we're getting good grades, and this family and these kids, they just thrived while the control group just
See,
went straight down. So it's like, yeah, you
see.
you are the product of your environment. And with this mom
Mhm.
whose story you're telling,
Mhm.
when she's like, well, just go learn, kid, go learn. And then all of a sudden I'm learning at a college level. That's wonderful. That's
Mhm.
wonderful.
Yep. Now, before we get into the climax, I know we have to wrap soon, of cancel culture and comedy, your true expertise and life's work, breaking out of that. There's a lot going on. You were just at CPAC and We're also in the midst of all of the like the Dominion lawsuit and what's coming out there. Now, just to do a quick kind of thing on that, I want to get your input as someone who, again, you're always on Gutfeld, you're on Fox Nation in the mix. What I've learned from this is basically, yet again, how both sides completely pander to their base, because we're learning like perhaps these pundits and hosts, when everything was going down, they really behind the scenes, had disdain for Trump or this or that, yet said another thing, another version of, again, MSNBC in my mind. We've proven now that masks are not efficient. It's been in the New York Times, for Christ's sake, right? And they're still over here like, we won't let this pro tennis star in without getting vaccinated. Like, it's wild,
God,
right?
yeah.
So, how do you see it? Because I got to tell you, it's really disheartening that it's like, not a surprise, but my takeaway again is like everyone just basically panders to their base.
Well, yes, but then you have to think like, well, who's base? Like, I would rather be part of the base on the right, who's going for individual liberty, individual freedom, not cancel culture, America first, than part of the base on the left. And this whole like Fox lawsuit thing really like their crime was they thought something in private yet presented another story in a journalistic fashion. Like, isn't that how journalism is supposed to work? I don't think you have to really believe something to do a news story about it. Like, I don't,
Right.
I don't, I don't see. Well, so hold on. Tucker Carlson doesn't like Trump, but he was on TV talking to a Trump supporter. That doesn't make him a hypocrite. That makes him a news guy. Like,
But what if it was something like, and this is where it's like, I hear people on the other side, how you're like, I'd rather be in this base, right? The other side will say the same thing. But even to the extent of, say, it's like when everything was going on with fraud, and if they thought, if even because I watched it playing out at the time and them really pushing and believing wholeheartedly, like this is all a hoax, fraud, and yet perhaps behind the scenes being like Trump's a madman off his rocker. Like, I don't know. There's just
well,
something to be
with
looked at there.
here's what I know. Here's what I know. The FBI, the intelligence community, and all the media on the left said for years that Trump was a Russian spy. He was a Russian asset. He was working with the Russians. That they said that for years, and there was no truth to that whatsoever. And they never apologized. And our FBI was in on it, and our intelligence community was in on it. Under Trump, no new wars. The economy was doing great. Everything was going, but they kept acting like, oh, it's the worst. It's the worst. Then COVID comes out and they tell us that's from bat soup. And now here we are all these years
So,
later going, oh, it was from the lab. So they lied about Trump. They lied about the lab. And then they're like, oh, if you get this vaccine, you'll never get COVID.
right.
Well,
They
now people in
lied.
Australia,
Yep.
more people with the vaccine are dying than people who don't have the vaccine. So, and now with the January 6th tapes that are coming out, and they're shedding light on that. So, someone is doing a shit ton of lying, and every conspiracy theory that's been floating around on my side has been proven true. So, that really makes you stop and scratch your head. What is going on here? I think we have a huge problem with the deep state, which I was told didn't exist. These are the same
Mm-hmm.
people. There's no such thing as the deep state. Well, there is. And isn't it funny how the instant we get out of Afghanistan because Biden hates forever wars, now all of a sudden we can't stop shoveling money to Ukraine? Something is very wrong in this country. And it's the media, and it's the deep state, and it's the military industrial complex, and we really just got to tap the brakes.
Mm-hmm. I'm merely suggesting, actually, I watched this off your site. What Russell Brand, he like obliterated this man on Bill Maher, but
Yeah.
pointing out the fact that like the people like the MSNBCs have the balls to call out Fox for this thing where they do the very same thing, right? So I'm just suggesting it just makes everything, we have to take everything with a grain of salt, and it's sad because it's like I just think it happens all around, and it
Well,
makes us be like, what's even true, and they both, I feel like to some extent, it's like they both just like lie. Like it's just like lies.
Well, I think the lies have stacked up on their side
You're like
quite a bit
they're
more.
winning on the
Those are some pretty big whoppers.
but
You
how
know,
much something that okay, so an example of this, right, where I get into where it feels just like petty politics and how much and politics have always been petty, right? Like we know this, but even like what happened with Ilan Omar, right? In Congress and how they took her off of her committee. And to me, it just feels like it's a game again of this tallying, like conservatives getting the majority. So they're reprimanding and like getting back at them because with January 6th and the committees, like they were taken off of they were reprimanded, right? So it just goes round and round. It makes me think like, do they really care about her anti-Semitic comments from whenever, or is it just them getting out the squad? Like it makes you second guess everything and how much of it is in the interest of us, the people, right?
well, that's why, and this is oddly enough, this is something that I learned from writing television shows. You can get focused on one little moment with a character and telling one little joke, and that's Ilan Omar. Ultimately, that chick doesn't matter. She doesn't matter. You can either focus on that or you focus on the entire structure of
Right.
the whole show. And so
Right.
in the past, since good Lord, this goes back to like 2015, and trying to step back and like what is important? What is That's when I'm really like doubling down on like yes, you can go, oh, Elon Omar got kicked off of a committee, yada yada yada. No, no, no. Here's a big one. Here's a big one. The World Health Organization says that 7 million people are dead from COVID, and no one seems to want to hold anybody accountable. And to me, that's
Mhm.
unimaginable. It
Mhm.
was the freaking Department of Energy that came out and said, "Oh, it looks like it came from a lab." Like the FBI said
Yeah.
it a while, but
Yep.
then the story resurfaced, and I'm like, I've been screaming about this for ages. Are you fucking kidding me? 7 million people are dead from COVID, and no one seems interested in knowing where it came from.
But
That's
if
fucking
you
outrageous.
and this gets into your thing and this there's just one thing I want to ask about CPAC, but even Woody Harrelson when it pertains to comedy and questioning the powers that be, Roseanne Barr recently said, that's dangerous if you're a person in power who can't take a joke. Woody Harrelson jokes about all the mandates and all this on SNL, and he's called a conspiracy theorist or he's pushing conspiracies. Like, give me a goddamn break. He's saying, right, what's actually true. I posted this to my story and one of my followers was like, the racist lady has a point. No, but really quickly, Michael, I know I'm going a little bit over, but with CPAC, I read a really interesting piece because you were there in the mix on the Free Press. And you talk about the base of the right wanting individualism and freedom and all this. But I have to say, this scared me in a way because it talks about how the people forming around Trump, it's almost like Trump absolutism, and how within CPAC there were a lot of young Republican folks who were like, I like Nikki Haley, I like DeSantis, I like this, and they were fucking skewered by the Trumpers, being like, you're not a patriot. It's almost like wokeism, but a little another version of it, right? It's like you have to obey Trump or else. Where do you think that's going, and what did you observe in
I
that
think that
regard?
there's a big struggle right now in the GOP on the right about what the future of the party is going to be, and yada
Sure.
yada. And here's the wild place that Trump finds himself in. The more you go after Trump, the more Trump people will defend him.
Right.
And
Trump
as
people.
all of this, all America First people, as all this
Yep.
stuff plays out, he goes, they're spying on my campaign. And they're like, oh, that's outrageous. Well, they were. And now we know the FBI was in on it, and it was FISA abuse, and they were altering emails to make innocent people look guilty. I mean, there's a lot of shady stuff going on. And James Comey was in on it. Like, so so when very powerful forces are trying to make this guy not happen, who is an outsider, and then they're like, "Oh no, look over here, it's the shiny thing and don't be a Trumper." Oh boy, the Trump people will just double and triple down on
Right.
that guy. And that is the huge appeal. when you see, oh, it's gonna be another Bush family guy. It's gonna be this
Right.
other Nikki Haley. That, like, I don't want that. Listen, I'm not even kidding you. We could get 100 of your listeners. We'll get 50 of your listeners. We'll get 50 of my listeners. We will run this government so much better than these morons who are professional politicians, who are getting rich off of being professional politicians. And like, it's an undeniable truth. You can feel it in your bones. There's no reason. How come we're defending Ukraine's borders, but we're not defending our own? How
Right.
come Djokovic can't come into the country? There's just so much bullshit. And
Mhm.
regular Americans can cut through that.
Mhm.
And for all his wealth and all his fame, Trump still is that. He's that outsider. He's that outsider.
Yeah.
Those are the people I want in politics.
Right. I
Regular,
agree.
ordinary citizens.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, Michael, because as of late, and this is 100% honest, I've actually thought about getting involved and running in some way, shape, or form
You
because of
should.
what you just said.
Yes,
I
you
literally thought
absolutely
about it. I was
should.
like, that could be
Vote
interesting.
for me.
AOC can do it. I'm
Vote
sorry.
for me and check out my OnlyFans. That would be the best.
No, period. It's like two American flags over my nipples. Done. Done.
Right? Or
Okay.
two eagles, two bald eagles.
Eagle. Yeah. Or the bald eagle, that's another story. Okay. Last shebang, Michael, cancel culture, obviously. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of laughter, like your whole, message and your work and what you do, your book, like all this goodness. So we can agree, right? Like, let's say it for what it is. Obviously, I'm not going to go on a whole thing about like my show's called Cancel Me Baby, for crying out loud. Like we all know cancel culture is bad and it's a thing,
Yes.
right? Um, and it's stifling, free speech. Like we can say this all day long. However, what would you say? You have also an established comedy show in New York City. I want you to tell us about that. But what would you say to the people who, and I hear this, who are like, cancel culture is not real? Morgan Wallen is back and selling more albums than ever. Roseanne Barr has a new comedy special. Even Mindy Kaling got shit because she made a comment about how, The Office would be canceled today. And people are so fucking uptight about cancel culture that they're like, it's not, well, then why is it on reruns all day long, Mindy Kaling, right? So it's like cancel culture deniers. So what would you say to that, to them?
Well, it's very, very real. Like, I was very fortunate with, by loving stand up and loving sketch comedy when I was soft canceled by Hollywood.
You
It's not it's
were? I knew, because I knew
oh,
you were very much like involved with the movers and shakers in Hollywood over the years. You have friends
yes.
in high places and etc.
It's
What
some
happened?
recent I think I've been on Fox News. I've done specials for Fox Nation. I have a sketch comedy show that makes fun of the woke and all this stuff. It's called That Show Tonight. Everyone should go to thatshowtonight.com and check it out. So it's like your phone just stops ringing from certain
Right.
elements. Like
Soft canceled. I
an
love that.
agent
That's kind of what happened to me too out there. That's pretty funny. Yeah.
Yeah, an agent of mine calls me up and they're like, "Hey, these people are thinking about developing this idea for a sitcom, and your writing history is fantastic. They've seen your stand up, they've read your work, they think you're great. Let's schedule a meeting." And you're like, "Okay, let's do it. Let's schedule a meeting." And then you never hear back. And then
Yeah.
I think what happens then is they go and they Google me and like, oh, he did a special on Fox Nation. Oh, here he is talking to Tucker Carlson. Wow, he's kind of chummy with the people from Fox and Friends. And then they just bail. So
Yep.
fortunately, stand up and the sketch comedy and That Show Tonight and the website and the podcast kind of fills that vacuum. But if you don't have that, if you don't have that other way to go, cancel culture is really terrifying.
Yeah.
If you're just a writer in Hollywood and someone discovers you're a conservative, what are you going to do? Work at Best Buy?
Or Radio Shack if there are any of those around still, no. But
Right?
but
Circuit
yeah.
City?
What's that?
Circuit City,
Oh, what a throwback. What a
right?
throwback. Yeah, and then I'm gonna go to Borders Books and just
Mm-hmm.
really call it a day. But I think too where it gets so gray is, I'll never forget, it was right on the cusp of cancel culture, and Ray Romano said to me, and it's on camera, and I asked him about this, and he's like, by his own admission, the most vanilla comedian, right, of all time. Everybody loves Raymond, but still iconic.
Yeah, he's a
And
great guy.
right. And he says, you have to be able to take the risk and push the boundary, because otherwise everyone will be me and that shit is boring. Right. But I interview a lot of these people, even still on my podcast. And I feel like a common thing that they say in the world of comedy is, you can be funny without being offensive. Like if it's that offensive, you have to try that hard. It's not funny. That's just, you have to have smart comedy, and that's just not smart. And
Well,
I just disagree. I feel
it
like
has to be funny. It
it,
has to be funny.
right,
Like you can it's so horrible. You would see these comics, out on the road because yeah, as the headliner or you're the main attraction, whatever. You always want to see what they're talking about in front of you, to make sure that you don't hit the same area. And every once in a while you come across somebody who tells like the most unfunny abortion joke, like the most unfunny abortion. And then he goes,
sure.
"Hey, so I guess you guys are a little touchy feely." Like,
Right,
no,
right,
dude, they're
right.
not. They want to laugh,
Right.
And so, and then they wrap themselves up in, "I was being edgy and they didn't like it." Well,
That's so true.
you should have been funny because they would have liked it a lot more,
Because
right?
it could
Like
be
Bill,
so brazen and offensive, but you're right. If it's funny versus when you hear like the janitor cleaning in the bag, it's like that's probably the telltale that you lost your crowd, And
yeah,
it's like
and
that
that's
should
like,
be the bar, not what the actual thing was or was
yes,
said, right?
yes, because like Dave Chappelle said it,
Mhm.
like I don't say things to hurt your feelings. I say the funniest things, and sometimes your feelings get hurt,
It's too bad for you. Sorry.
right?
What do you think, Michael, lastly, being in, the realm with all of these comedians and your shows and everything you're doing, what just happened with Woody Harrelson, which I can't even believe they allowed that on SNL. That's like shocking. But are you finding that comedians are afraid right now? Or are they just like, I don't care? You know, what's
A couple of
happening?
years ago, here's what happened. So I did my stand-up special for Fox Nation like during the lockdown. They're like, "Hey,
Yeah.
we're thinking about messing around with comedy. Do you think you could do an hour for us?" And I'm like, "I'd love to." And that's why I shot it at Nashville. And that was before I met you, Sugar Cheeks.
Oh, yeah. To bring it all back to where we started, I was like, I am going to go cry me a river because I was not invited to Michael's Nashville special. My
I
God.
didn't know you yet. You are so invited for the next one.
Fair enough.
And so I was actually talking to Greg Gutfeld about this because for
Uh-huh.
me, like I love being the underdog. I fucking
Yeah,
love it.
that's
And
true.
when I'm saying and people are like, "Dude, that was super funny. It was edgy. Like there's a little bit of danger to it." That's to me, that's sexy as shit, right? It's like I used to be in a punk band a million years ago, and I had this feeling like this is like that same feeling. And I was talking to Gutfeld about it, and this is, because his show was doing great, and he's like, "It is. It's the new punk rock." Like, and you watch, it's just happening more and more. Chris Rock's latest special, Dave Chappelle, Joe Rogan, all these guys, their careers are
Yeah,
skyrocketing
right.
because they're telling the truth, they're being super funny about it, and it's taboo. Everybody loves taboo.
We do. But Michael, with that being said, and lastly, before you tell us again all the great places that we can find you and be in your goodness, will you, given that you are on Fox all the time, it's your crowd, will you take aim at the conservative crowd too and make, we all say we got to make fun of ourselves, right? Oh, he's like,
That
yes.
was absolutely,
He's like, they're first
absolutely.
on the list, they're going down now. No,
Like
but
I will always make fun of the morons like Lindsey Graham. We did a Lindsey Graham thing that was just hilarious. Like so yeah, everybody is fair game. If you're a hypocrite, if you're a moron, you're fair game. And that's the wonderful thing. It's like as Saturday Night Live, they're talking about now Saturday Night Live is going to be sticking the dismount, right? That's on the radar.
Mhm.
So the sketch comedy show that I do, that show tonight, you never know what's going to happen. You
I love
never
it.
know what angle we're going to hit, and that makes it more exciting. That's like Saturday Night Live and comedy, woke comedy has gotten predictable. It's predictable. You know, oh, they're going to go at Trump. They're going to go at it this way. This is going to be their comedic angle, and that's boring. And with us,
Oh,
like
I
never
know it.
knowing, it's exciting. It's titillating. Is he going to kiss my neck or is he going to touch my titty? Where's that finger going? It's that.
And what is worse than woke comedy? Number one, nothing is funny to them, but you can so tell woke. It's like what you said. It's like the Alec Baldwin Trump shtick, or like even like Jonah Hill's new movie, like, the chubby white Jew curl guy who's a Jew, ha ha ha. It's like, in the bounds of like what's so not funny, but they've deemed it appropriate, right? It's just so boring
Yes,
and lame.
yes. And there's all these like it's all self-deprecating humor.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's all self-deprecating humor. And like I want everything. I want the whole buffet. Like when I started doing comedy, it's like, okay, well, there's Carrot Top. He's doing some wacky stuff, but he's making a ton of people laugh. Oh, there's Bill Burr. He's doing something different. Hey, there's Jeff Dunham. He's got a puppet. Like
Right.
I want everything. I want squeaky clean comedy. I want storytellers. I want dirty dudes talking about
True.
how they like their dick sucked by their wife, like Patrice O'Neill. Patrice O'Neill talking
Oh,
about
man.
blowjobs. Hilarious. I want it all.
Yeah. And I just love what it stands for in at the core of it. Yes, I watch Friends every night. Like I love the vanilla comedy, but on the other end of it, like if we can't challenge the establishment and stereotypes and awkward things in real life and, all these things, if comedy can't do it, what like we are just screwed. So,
Right. And then like here's what I don't want. I don't want everybody doing political stuff
true,
either.
true.
Like
Right.
I want Seinfeld and what's the
Yeah,
deal with that? I want
right.
all of it. And and as a sitcom
Yeah.
guy, I used to have do you remember a show called Two Broke Girls?
Of course.
So a buddy of mine was a writer on Two Broke Girls, and then in the meantime, I was writing on this show with Charlie Sheen called Anger Management. And
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
it was like the same time slot. And these writers would be like, "Oh, that Two Broke Girls, that's lowbrow. It's so blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Let's look at their ratings, right? Like, so let's be funnier than that." So you can
Char-
don't
but, yeah.
count other people's money. Don't have arguments with people who aren't in the room, and just mind your own business. Individuals.
Yeah. Charlie Sheen's a nice man, by the way. I've interviewed him. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but nice man.
He's a great dude. He's a
Yeah.
great dude. I thoroughly enjoyed hanging out with him for a couple
Yeah.
of years.
Yeah. Very much. Like when I interviewed him, it was like soccer dad. He's like, I'm just carpooling my kids to school. I'm like, who would have thunk it, Charles. All right, Michael, this was so much fun. I am so sorry I went over my time, but I'm actually not sorry because, I have to educate myself on how to stay in the bounds of podcasting time. But where can we find you? Obviously, the Loftus Party and many of the great things you're doing in your new book and all the good things.
Here's people need theloftusparty.com and thatshowtonight.com. And if they want to go on Amazon and pick up a copy of Neither Stunning Nor Brave, that would be awesome. But that's it. Those are the websites.
Michael, so I did a 1984 book club and it was in 2020 and I talked to my audience about perhaps doing another book club and maybe Neither Stunning Nor Brave will be our next
Whoa!
choice.
I'm gonna have to go subscribe to somebody's OnlyFans.
Exactly. Equality, am I right? Michael, thank you so much. What a time. I can't wait to dethrone Nikki Haley and Trump and all these people. We'll reconvene
Start it.
offline and make it
Start it.
happen.
Mayor of Nashville, governor of Tennessee, the
Done.
White House.
Done. Done. Thank you, Michael, so much. I apologize again for going over time.
You're beautiful. We'll do it again.